as a designer, I don't mind the I don't mind the random. Give me all of your images. I don't want to see other images of other weddings. I want to see things that inspire you. I want to see what inspires you from architecture to art, movies, music. Um, Flipping through a magazine and seeing something.
Hey everybody, Eddie Babbage here, founder, CEO of Timeline Genius, your host of the Wedding Industry Insider Podcast, and I am here with one of my favorite people in our industry, Kristin Banta. For those of you that have been tuned into the podcast for long enough, you may remember she was actually on back in 2016. Amazing episode. We'll post the link in the show notes. Kristin, what a delight to catch up with you here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this interview with me.
I am so happy to see you, and what a delight to reconnect with you after all these years. We've just had such a special bond, and it's nice to be back in the room with you virtually.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to kind of give people a preview of where we're going with this conversation, we're going to cover a couple of different bases. One, I said this in the pre-interview. I think I would be remiss in my duties as the podcast host here if I didn't talk to you about design, because you're so talented, and I see your work. I mean, it's just breathtaking, and I just want to be a conduit for just sharing some of the magic that you have and the know-how that you have in that, but also to kind of talk about some of the more practical sides of being in business. Some of the stuff that we're talking about in the pre-interview, how you navigating COVID, navigating the inevitable ups and downs of just running a business, particularly in this industry. But before we get into that, for anybody that's listening that hasn't heard of you, would you mind just giving a brief introduction? Tell them kind of how you got to be, in a nutshell, how you got to be where you currently are in our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am the CEO and creative director of Kristin Banta Events, KBE, and we have been around for 23 years. It's been a while, which has been a crazy ride. I mean, as you and I talked about, there have been ups and downs, and when you are around for over 2 decades, there is it is without even being able to explain. It's a crazy ride. I actually started in production. I think you know a little bit about this. I started in production for theater. That was my undergraduate way back in, we're not going to talk about it. And that was a really important foundation for me, because that taught me scenic design, lighting design. It taught me, I even learned carpentry and welding. I mean, it was an interesting background to come from. I transitioned out of that into doing small local events in fashion and music. And then honestly, I opened up this business because, not because I was an expert in weddings, but because I thought that there was a niche part of the market that was underrepresented. And, I think that that is really the cornerstone of some of the things you and I have talked about in terms of, how businesses have staying power. I looked at my set of skills, and the determination that I had was that there was something that I had that was able to be developed into something that maybe was lacking in the wedding industry, which was a less traditional point of view, honestly. So when I opened this business, we focused on weddings. Now we're very diverse. I mean, having been in this for so long, we do a handful of weddings. We do a lot of sort of high end corporate that's more on the design side. We do premiere after parties. We work in tech, beauty. We're kind of all over the place in a really good way. And all these years later, this is kind of where we landed, and weddings are still a sweet spot for us. But now, we get the opportunity to do a lot of different things.
I love that. And just to give our listeners, the full sort of context, or at least the high level context here, my connection with you, and when people hear the very sincere, just delight that I get from talking to you. People should know that in the very early days of Timeline Genius, I started about 10 years ago, but in those very early days, long before we had the footprint or traction, that we have now, there really were just like a small number of people who were so supportive of what we're doing and who just saw the vision. And I remember talking to you back then, and even now it's like, wow, like you're Kristin Banta, like people that are in this industry, your name, your reputation precedes you, and yet you were just so cool and down to earth um, in every interaction. You've just always been that, and I just think it's amazing, and I
Mhm.
think it's easy for people in your situation to, in the same way that you hear about like rock stars or whatever that have all these demands before they go on stage. Like you can get a big head. You're an artist and you're great at what you do, but I've never gotten a whiff of that in any of our interactions, and I think that's really really cool.
I really
Um,
appreciate that. Thanks, Eddie. It's you always just bring such light to my day. Thank you.
Yeah. No, very sincere. So kind of on that note, Kristen, there's so many things that we can talk about, but like I said, at the top of the interview here, let's talk about design. Because even though you and I haven't caught up as much as I'd love to talk to you because we're both super busy, I see from afar, the footprint that you have, the events that you're doing, and they're stunning. Um, where let's just kind of start with this. How much of what you do is God given talent versus grit and work?
It's an interesting question. I I always kind of refer to myself as sort of that weird like art kid in the corner. I have a different way of looking at things than some, and I think some connect and relate to the work that I do, and others don't. And I say this as sort of a preempt because I think that what is the most active component of the work that I do is not being afraid to take risks.
Mm,
um
mm,
the vision starts obviously in our camp. I have a tremendous team that I work with. We conceptualize here, we design in house, and then we field out these concepts based upon the inspiration that we get from our events. We kind of come up with what we call the design line, and that design line is really the ebb and flow of the event. It's how it should look, it's how it should feel, it's what the guest experience should be.
mm,
When we talk about design, we're talking about the visual assets, of course, but we're also talking about, the five senses. What are we tasting? What are we smelling? What are we listening to? What are we hearing and what are we touching? Um, if we can take guests through a tactile experience of our events, then we're creating memories truly, not just in the sense of like, hey, I went to this event, whatever. We are creating the guest ability to actually have an imprint, a footprint into the event because they are digesting this in an all sensory standpoint,
mm,
right?
mm,
So that's how we start kind of conceptualizing our events. And then once we have a design intact and we create our storyboards and our design decks, we take those out to a very talented roster of suppliers,
mm,
and it is with them that this vision, and only with them, that it can actually come to life. There's so many sort of, we have a laundry list of things that we try and source for events, and some of which are really random. I had an event for a premiere after party for The Eyes of Tammy Faye for Searchlight, who's been one of our clients, fortunately, for many years. And came up with this idea that I wanted phones throughout the entire event. I wanted sort of blue phones because it was about Tammy Faye's life, and her being, on a televangelistical hotline.
mm.
Televangelical?
I can't help. I wish
Right?
I could.
And she's on these hotlines as sort of, a call to action, and you see that in the film predominantly. And so I wanted these sort of vintage 1980s phones to appear throughout the event and in abundance, all of which had, little labels in. Do you remember those old phones where you had sort of that little tag at the end where your phone number was supposed to be,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
They're hard to find. And so I had, this call out to, prop houses to find 60 of these random blue phones. You know,
Wow.
this is it's a, it's tangential, but I say this because we can only design that which is possible to actually support.
Right.
So, at the cast and crew and attendees loved these phones, and everyone took the phones from the event. And it was something where throughout the night, people were on the phones, and it became a very tactile experience, and it was very successful for us. I actually have one of the phones. It's like sitting on a little pedestal. There's so much fun, but what a small but impactful moment that would not have been possible if we didn't have amazing prop stylists and prop finders for us. This is the cornerstone. It really, it's about having a point of view, it's about developing a design, and then it's about fielding it out to people that are tremendous talents that are able to make that vision come to life. And without them, the vision doesn't happen. So I can't take all the credit.
That's really cool, Krista. As you were talking, an idea sort of occurred to me. I feel like, like I told you, my oldest, my 9-year old's into chess, and I saw this random video today, and he's like, here's the principle you need. Like, this guy's like, principle that'll help you be better than most chess players. And I feel like no matter what we're doing, whether it's business, whether it's chess, whether it's anything, there are these sort of guiding principles. Now, admittedly, there are always exceptions to rules, but if
Hmm.
you had to kind of boil it down, um, if we were to talk through, just say, the top three guiding principles for you when it comes to, design, just to give an example here to make this a little less abstract. If somebody were like, Eddie, what are one of the top principles of entrepreneurship? You've started 3 companies, like, tell me. I would say one of my top principles is make sure that you are solving a pain for people, right? Like, I just, like, for me and other people, everybody's going to have a different perspective, but for me, I'm like, just make sure you are finding a way to solve a pain. For you, when it comes to design, if I was like, Kristin, what's one of the top principles, your guiding principles for doing great design? What comes to mind for you?
Well, I think the overarching principle for me is to have a point of view,
Mm, okay.
to figure out what is your unique contribution to your craft. What is that? I know that, for me, it's stylistically, I have, more of a minimalist style. I like either going absolutely nuts or going very, very minimalist. And that is, a point of view that we really uphold. There's a line on our website that says, minimalism is great, maximalism is too. What we try to avoid is
Mm,
is mediumism.
mm-hmm.
And I think that, when we found this quote, which is from David Hoey, and it's so impactful to me because that really, that's it. It's the cornerstone of what I believe in, what my team believes in, which is, to have this it's sort of explosive, take on design that isn't just opulence for the sake of opulence. There's always a reason behind things. And so that's kind of point two under the overall find your point of view. I think that in doing so, everything needs to have relevance. Otherwise, it doesn't make us feel anything.
Well, one
We
sec,
can,
Kristen. I want to unpack that. Don't lose your train
yeah,
of thought
yeah,
there.
yeah.
I
Tell
want
me.
to unpack the having a point of view because, you know, first of all, like, do you sometimes have a point of view and then find it challenging to express it, or scary to express it? Or is that not the hard part? Is the hard part having the point of view or expressing it or both? Like, how do you kind of see both of those things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we can't be worried about pleasing everyone.
Okay.
If you have a point of view and it's truly rooted in something that is, unique and intrinsic to you as a creative, as a talent, as an entrepreneur, um, that's going to resonate with some. We touched on this, but it's going to resonate with some, and it's not going to resonate with others.
Right.
Uh, People either are connected to the work that I do, or they think that they don't get it. And that's okay. One has to reconcile themselves with the fact that we can't please everyone. But to not have a point of view um, means that we're stuck in this abyss of everyone. We can't stand out if we don't have something unique that we are able to define and contribute. It gets back to mediumism.
Is it
Um,
scary for you sometimes when you are,
sure.
yeah?
Absolutely. And there's times when I will go forward, but I'll kind of look around and be like, is it are you guys is anybody getting this? Are you with me? Like, is this weird? Is this and sometimes the answer is yes, and I'm going to go forward anyway. Um, it just everything has to have a reason. It's never rebel without a cause. It's rebel with a cause. We need to find the relevance and the why behind the things that we do and that support our point of view. Does that make sense?
It does. How do you know when you're getting something right? And maybe the answer is you don't ever know 100%, but like, do you have times where you're like, you come to an idea or a design and you're like, oh, this is it, right? Like, this is spot on. Is there something in you that just knows, or are you always kind of like, I mean, I think about it in the context of Timeline Genius. Sometimes we'll launch a feature and I'm like, even though we've done all this research, I don't know 100%. It's kind of like that MailChimp send button that has the sweat dripping off the monkey paw that they
Yeah,
used to have.
yeah.
It's like, we'll hit send and see what happens. Like, and then in the vast majority of cases, like this was over and over. And sometimes it's not like a resounding, and you learn from that. But do you have a way to know when you're putting yourself out there that like this is going to land or it's not? Are you kind of validating along the way? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, in the spirit of taking risk, you don't know if it's going to work.
Wow. Yeah.
There are certain things that we've done that are highly conceptual. A lot of the things that I feel like are my favorite things that I've designed are things that um, were to be experienced. The photos will never make sense if you weren't there. And those things are, I think, the riskiest because it's all about trying to channel the guest reactions to figure out what are they going to respond to in the moment. And telling a story in that experiential way is always, you don't know if it's going to land or not, where it's like, are people going to get this? Is this too out there? I mean, we've done so many of these things where I know that I've pitched them to suppliers and vendors that are working with us and fellow creatives, and it's kind of like, wait, what? And sometimes it's like, God, like, is this too out there? But you got to try, and
Yeah.
otherwise it's just an abyss of florals. And there's nothing wrong with florals. I'm not bagging on
Right.
florals, please know that. But it's I don't think, for me, the answer is always much for the sake of much. And we could bring in 9,000 florals to encrust on various things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to make you feel anything. If we're going to do that, there really has to be a reason. There has to be a relevance, and that's when I think that there's the payoff. um that's what we're looking for. We're looking for something that is rooted, um that's rooted in relevance, to where the guest experience is like, ah, okay, okay, okay. um and then it doesn't matter how anyone outside of the event is perceiving it. It's how the guests are perceiving it that are actually there in the moment.
And was that point to guiding principle number two is relevance? Like, And,
Yeah.
and by relevance, do you mean, I remember at our wedding, my wife did all of the, she's type A DIY kind of personality.
Hmm.
We had tables, and she and I are both really into documentaries. And we had our tables arranged based on various documentaries that we watched. So one of them was like the Barbarians table, and all my boys were like, oh, I see you put me at the Barbarian table. Like, touche it. But it was like, is that the relevance dynamic, that it's like something that's personally meaningful to us and to them, or is there a different sort of meaning here that I'm missing?
No, I think that that's very much it, and you can go as deep with that as you want. I mean, I had an event for a couple, and they one proposed to the other in a little rowboat, and they, kind of set out on a lake, and that's where the proposal happened. And so from there, I got this idea of, okay, so they're kind of anchored in this lake, and I was kind of picturing, the anchor dropping and sort of nautical rope, and decided to do a play on that. So, for the tabletops, we had three long tabletops that were for 100 each, super super long. They went from one end of the room to the other end of the room, and the only thing on the tabletops was nautical rope, and the rope twisted and turned and knotted and fell and pooled to the floor. And it was gold because they had these gold brooches that were special to them, they collected and gave to all of the bridal party.
Hmm.
And that's all it was just gold nautical rope, but there were hundreds and hundreds of feet of it.
Hmm.
um, for those that were present at that event, there was a link to that. It wasn't random. Everything has cause, everything has a reason why it's there. And for those that were in attendance, they got that.
How do you,
And
it's like sometimes you listen to like great art, like music. I'm such a music lover, and like you can listen to like a good hip hop song or a Bob Dylan or whatever, you're just like a good symphony, and you're going to hear new stuff. It's so layered. And it's almost like, part of me is like, it almost sucks to be the artist, because like there's no way that most people are even getting all of this. Like, how do you make sure that everybody's getting, like, that's beautiful. Like, how do you make sure that people are getting the artistry, or do you just live with the fact that like a lot of this is just going to kind of go over people's conscious brains? They're not going to get it. Like, how does that work?
yeah, you have to be willing to risk that some people are just not going to get it, and they're going to be like,
Right.
this is weird, don't get it.
Right. Sure.
Others, it resonates at one level, whereas to your point, I mean, for through all of us, we can listen to the same piece of music, and certain parts of it are going to resonate with us. We
That's
also, as human beings, we hear things in different frequencies.
that's
Sort
right.
of an obtuse way of looking at things,
Right.
but that's how we perceive art. We can have
Yeah.
an entire group of us that go to visit, some piece that we are all perceiving differently. um we can look at a Liechtenstein and say, okay, well, I see this, well, I think the deeper
Right.
meaning is this.
Right.
Well, I think he's trying to say
Right.
this. um
That's
with
art.
any artist,
That's right.
whether it's
Right.
it could be a Hockney, it could be
Yeah.
a Rembrandt. But we as human beings, certain frequencies will resonate with us differently, and we can't speak to all of those frequencies, but we can bring out things that are melodic and that have a tempo, and that are beautiful and dissonant, and all those things can coexist together. But we can't be afraid to have those coexist. We can't be afraid to have things that are, to reflect on it, dissonant, unappealing to some, because to others they're going to perceive beauty in that. To some,
Totally.
they sat at this table and they're like, I don't get it, where are the flowers?
Right.
To others it was like, wow, the absence of what I thought was to be a part of a wedding reception
Right.
is interesting, and I'm responding to that. And maybe I didn't even know that I could respond to that, but it's moving me in some way. But you
It's
have to risk the fact that some people were like, where are the flowers, this is weird, you know
It's funny. I know it feels a little silly now that I'm a decade into this industry to confess this, but I've made the public confession before. It didn't really hit me until years into working on Timeline Genius that like you're an artist, a multi-sensory, your medium isn't just sound the way, say a singer's is, it's not just visual the way that a painter, but it's all of those checkpoints that you kind of, all five senses, and that you're engineering this experience for people. And there's a real talent that goes into that. Where do you find, Kristin, your inspiration? What are your sources of inspiration?
Everything.
Okay.
Um, it's about the things that if we're listening and paying attention, it's the little things that ring bells. In that same wedding, when I was talking to one of the two grooms about what they were going to wear, he's a fashion designer and had such tremendous style. And there was this look that he had that was sort of long fabric statement, and it gave me the idea, as inspired by this garment that he was wearing, to do a play on that for the decor. And so we ended up doing the entire ceremony, and leading up to the ceremony was just fabric. That's all it was.
Mm.
It was one thing done en masse, right?
Hmm.
um Maximalism. So we started with fabric that puddled at the base of a staircase, and then went up the stairs on either side of the staircase, and turned around as we got to the landing, and went up another set of stairs, and went down a hallway, through a room, and down another hallway. And then as we opened up into the ceremony space, that same fabric trailed down the entire length of the aisle and grew into the altar. That was
Wow.
all it was. It was just fabric. And it was one continuous piece of fabric from start to finish.
Wow.
As you ascended the stairs, some people started to perceive that, others did not. But that inspiration it was all very intentional. It came from them. That was one thing that my brain held on to, that inspired me. And
Mm.
sometimes it's just a nuance. It's like a little nugget, and we can expound upon it, and it can be something that's really riveting to some, and again, as we talked about, something that's lost on others, and that's okay. But I think that inspiration comes from everywhere, and I have to constantly remind myself, um get out, look around. Don't let the coffee table books just sit there. Look through them, see what other artists are doing, see where other inspiration is coming from. Dive into those channels. Sometimes I'll rabbit hole in Pinterest, which is it can be used for good and for evil. Pinterest can get us stuck in trends, but at its core, it is a deep dive into image search, where we can find anything we want, and I can spend hours circling and channeling through images that I'll set aside and just have to remember that were things that inspired me. So I mean, I think finding those places where we can archive inspiration, and we can revisit it, is really important. I revisit those images all the time.
As a wedding planner, you know how important it is to create detailed wedding day timelines for your events. But creating your timelines can be a tedious and time-consuming job. Until now. Because Timeline Genius lets you create beautiful, detailed wedding day timelines with ease. And it keeps everything you need on the wedding day in one central place. Here's how it works. First, Timeline Genius saves all your clients, vendors, and venues in your Rolodex, so you don't lose time looking for their information. And when you're ready to create a new timeline, you simply enter the key information for your wedding. Click a button, and voila! Timeline Genius magically gives you a customized timeline for your event, where all the details are laid out and the times are calculated for you. From there, you can easily edit your timeline by adding or deleting items, inserting images, changing font styles, and customizing everything to your liking. You can also instantly shift the times for as many items as you want. And when it comes to your clients and vendors, Timeline Genius lets you give them the highest level of service. You can send them tailored timelines showing only the items they're involved in. And you can collaborate by inviting them to a mobile-friendly, web-based version of the timeline. You can even set text message reminders to automatically go out on the wedding day. And once you've completed your perfect timeline, you can download it or email it out as a beautifully styled PDF. And that's Timeline Genius, a smart software that will help take your wedding planning to the next level. Start your free trial today.
Do you ever, Kristin, this may be a silly question, but I can't resist asking. You know, I've got a buddy of mine who's really into Broadway theater. You know, I'm out here in New York. And, you know, sometimes, you know, he was the first person to tell me about Hamilton. He saw it like before it ever hit Broadway. He's like, dude, I just saw something that's about to take over the world. Sure enough, you know, Hamilton's still rolling. It's all over, I'm running, it's all over the place. But then there are these shows that happen and they're amazing. And they don't just stay on indefinitely. They come, they go, they're off Broadway, whatever. And once it's gone, it's gone. It's like there's this like ephemeral nature to it, right? And you can't go hear it again like you either were there, and that's events. So you're doing this art, people come, they may be mesmerized. Is there any part of you that's like, I wish I could just hit a replay button the same way like an artist can on a great track that they've done and just like listen to it again? But like you said, pictures don't tell the whole story because that's just one dimension, one sensory input, the visual. Like, do you ever wish like that we had like virtual reality or something where you could just replay the event? Or is it like, no, that just is what it is and it is what it is, you know?
You know, sometimes, and I reflect on that sometimes when I look at images that where you can't know the whole story. You know, the fabric ceremony is one where if you look at it, it's like, wow, this is what's is something else going in here?
Yeah.
What it's just this black fabric, you know, but when you're there, it's it came from somewhere, you know.
Right.
It's not just black fabric. It came from somewhere, and it was a part of a story. And I think that's when sometimes I wish that in this medium we had the opportunity to re-experience, because that was a part of somebody's story, and that story only gets to live, the retelling of their story,
Right.
with these mediums we have at our fingertips, only gets to live for one day. And
Right.
that's the interesting and sometimes, challenged part of
Yeah.
this world, isn't it? Because, we go through all this effort and we've got one shot at it, and
Yeah.
man, we better get it right.
Yeah. But you know what's funny, as you were talking, Kristin, I realized that like on the one hand, you know, it's kind of like life, not to get overly like wax philosophical here, but like sometimes when good things happen, you almost wish you could put it in a bottle. You know, it might be like for me having just totally random, like holding my 2-year old, you know, on my chest, right? Or like whatever,
Yeah.
like that doesn't happen anymore. You kind of wish like, but in a way, the fact that we can't bottle up life despite all of our efforts with video now on our smartphones and audio recording and photography, at the end of the day these moments come and they go. But the flip side of that is like we know that there's like a sacredness to them, right? Like when you're at an event, I guess the flip side is everybody knows, at least on a subconscious level, like this is only happening once and it is what it is, and you can really just kind of embrace the magic as such, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
um, so what would you say is like a third principle, Kristen? So your point of view, what a really interesting point to start off with, no pun intended. Secondly, having that relevance as a guiding principle. If you had to pull out a third guiding principle for you that is just very important to successful design, what third principle would you elevate here?
I think that, and this is more along sort of the tools and the business of doing business, figuring out how to articulate vision is, to me, one of the fundamentals of whether we will be successful or not.
Hmm.
Um, you know, it's communication is the foundation of any business, of course, but it certainly is, it's the difference of when designs work and they don't work is how much we can actually create a dialogue that communicates what it is that we're looking to achieve. And that is so important, figuring out how we can take something that's in our heads and then, parlay that into a written narrative, images that support, sketches, all the things. And by the way, I lean on all three of those things. I go through a very, very deep dive of imagery when I'm putting together designs where it's kind of like, and I have to walk people through it because it's not so simple. It's like I want what's in this image. Many times it's okay if you take image one and marry it with image two and then lay it over image three, that's what I'm after.
Mm,
And that's not enough because in addition, I've written you this narrative, sometimes, that are several pages long, and we will hand those specially to our vendors and suppliers and say, look, take these images, take this narrative from start to finish of what I want this event to feel like, what I want it to look like, smell like, all the things. Um, now are you starting to get it? And if not, I can give you a really terrible sketch. My drawings are terrible. Um, but if I am communicating in all of these mediums, then sooner or later, I think that all of us will be able to come together and try to figure out where this thing is going and how to maximize its capabilities. But it can't come with some flat image that it's like, do this. It's not enough. It can't come without really understanding how to take what's in one's mind and one's imagination and kind of putting it on page and putting it in images and being able to walk people through that. And that's the tough thing is that, how do we take what's in our heads and push it outwards? That's a big part, I think, of what I do. That is sort of the cornerstone of whether an idea can come across and live successfully or not.
and that's really fascinating. When you do that, to what degree is the process, does it unfold in the paradigm of like you have an idea, you articulate it, and that's what gets done versus you have an idea, you articulate it, feedback is coming from people, and you all collaboratively massage it? Like, which of those paradigms is like the way that things are typically playing out for you?
Yeah, I think every job's a little bit different. Many of our jobs, uh, there's not a ton of room for collaborative because it's very fleshed out before it leaves our desk.
Right.
Many times it's a laundry list. I
Right.
want rope, I want fabric. here's
Right.
the here's the type of fabric I'm looking for. Tell me if there's obstacles in getting the following resources for me. I want 60 blue phones that are from the 80s. um I think that that's about 50% of our jobs. The
Okay.
other 50%, I am totally open to a dialogue. It's not that I'm not open to a dialogue at all times. And it's not that I'm not open to creative input. Sometimes it's just the book is almost complete before it is going out. It's already been edited and we just need to get it to the publisher. Whereas other times I think it's kind of like, okay, here's kind of what I want. These are very general images. Here's a general idea. Now tell me what you can source. Come back to me and know that I'm open. I think that I want this textile, and I think I'm looking for a bar that is this countertop and this shape, but let me know what you can source because look, at the end of the day, not everything can be custom. I can't Not everything can I just pull out of thin air and then have it materialize. We are so beholden to the things, going back to what we were talking about earlier, the things that we can get and the sourcing that is available to us for this one day. It's not always so simple as like, think it up and it can happen. With unlimited budgets, sometimes that is very challenging. So, the other half of the time, I think it's really about going to our partners and just saying, okay, here's what I want this to feel like and look like. You tell me, what do you think? What can you get? Pitch me, you know?
That's really interesting, Kristen. So, yeah, just kind of recapping in my head, I feel like these are three really powerful points: the point of view, relevance, and being able to articulate your vision. That those are three just guiding principles and pillars. As you're talking, I hope and I know, actually, I don't even just hope, I know that what we're talking about is inspiring people that are listening right now, lighting people up, getting their creative juices flow. I mean, heck, I'm not even designing weddings and mine are flowing just listening to this sort of artistic perspective. um, but I want to kind of broaden the sort of like relevance here because obviously not everybody listening to our podcast is just purely focused on design. What do you say to the people out there that are, say they're doing wedding planning? Let's say for sake of this question, full service wedding planners, and they're thinking about the logistics, which obviously are near and dear to my heart. If you don't have a meticulously crafted timeline, you can have the best design in the world, but if everything else is off track, like that's a problem, right? But
1000%. Yeah.
absolutely. But for those folks that are kind of, maybe they have an inclination that like, I kind of would like to be trying a little bit more with design, or maybe I should just stay in the lane of just focusing on logistics. Like, do you have any sort of thoughts or ideas that you would share to folks? Like, to what degree do you feel like every wedding planner should be thinking, at least to some degree, as an artist about the events that they're doing? Like, how do you, I don't even know if I've really buttoned that question up much, but does that kind of make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I don't think that we all have different talents, and honing in on what each of our unique skills are is half the battle. There are some that are organizational masterminds. There
Right.
are others that are have tremendous talents when it comes to hospitality. There are others that are just tremendous, leaders and can pull together different vendors and really lead a team. All of these are tremendous attributes to this craft of producing events. um you know for me, it's more the creative side. Again, it gets back to
Yeah.
that weird art kid that's just kind of like, I don't know, do you guys get this? I think would be cool. um that's not everyone, and I think that even if one is not interested or capable of actually doing the design in house, that's okay, because you can still be a conduit to storytelling.
Right.
What I would encourage is, in doing so, to really ask all the questions. That's how it can be handed over to those that are a part of that sort of figuring out, here's the information, how do we then run it through this system to figure out, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do fabric that goes up and down stairs, we're going to do gold rope. Ask those questions, and that is a tremendous value, I think, to anyone in this position. So, what I mean by that is going to the client, whether that's a wedding client, or if you're, on the event side, that could even be a corporate client. How do we want guests to feel? What inspires you, the client or the couple? When it comes to couples, that is I mean, to mine couples for all the information, there's so much that we can take away from two different people that are coming together with their own separate interests, and then together their experiences as a couple. It is ripe with inspiration ideas. So ask the questions. What inspires you as a couple? Where have you been? What are your favorite dining experiences that you've ever had? Like, what are those food moments that you will never forget? What are the things that make you laugh? What are the inside jokes that you have? What are the things that people would say if you said, what is that thing that that guy always says? What is that thing that I think of when I think about that couple? Ask the questions from inside out. How do people see them? How do they see themselves? What are the experiences that inspire them, no matter how random? As a designer, I don't mind the I don't mind the random. Give me all of your images. I don't want to see other images of other weddings. I want to see things that inspire you. I want to see what inspires you, from architecture to art, movies, music. Um, Flipping through a magazine and seeing something. We've had images where we start to see enough of them and we see patterns in them where it's like, oh, I see. You're really into lighting. Lighting's a big thing for you. If you look at all of these, I don't care if the client comes to me and is like, I don't really know why I think these things are cool, but these are the things I pulled out. I think they're pretty cool. So, as somebody that's more on the coordination side or the planner side that isn't actually doing the design work, they can be a tremendous conduit to having greater depth in the design by asking the right questions.
Mm, that is super cool. It makes me think about, sometimes with timeline genius, a lot of like people are like, oh my God, this is genius. And I'm like, actually, you know what? I didn't just like come up with this. Like I listened to people who had
Hmm.
an issue. And what I'm almost hearing, and I could see this applying no matter how much you are or are not bringing this design component to your work, whether your logistics is your focus or not, just this notion of really dialing into, and it kind of almost takes me back to my question about where your inspiration comes from, dialing into your couple, getting to know them and what lights them up, what inspires them, and processing that information can only help you kind of in what you're giving to them in the form of their event. Um,
Absolutely. And quite honestly, that can be the most cherished part of this process, is when you actually get to know who you're designing or planning for, or
yeah,
both. That's what's fun, is that we get to see these, we're part of these blips in people's lives. And if we're paying attention and if we're taking the time, we get to be a part of really getting to know two people and what makes them unique as a couple. I mean, what a cool thing.
that is awesome. That is awesome. So I knew this would happen. The time flies. It always does when I have great guests on. I do want to talk about um, a little bit of the business side because in the pre-interview we did that. Before I do, I just want to give a quick shout out for Timeline Genius. So for those listening, if you do wedding day timelines or event day timelines, if you're using Word or Excel or Google Docs or Stone tablets, whatever you're doing, I want you to know there's a better way. If you go to timelinegenius.com, you can start a free trial. Just watch the video on the homepage. Just came back from Wedding MBA. I was telling Kristin actually in the pre-interview that it's just magical. Anytime that I find there's still a lot of people that just haven't seen how Timeline Genius works. The fact that there's this AI that we've built that constructs a detailed, customized initial timeline. You can embed images in your timeline, floor plans. You can set text reminders to go out, collaboration, all of this stuff. It's just really over the last 10 years, we've just, I think, nailed it in terms of, and I say that with all humility and objectivity. It really is just a great way to create and execute your timeline, save time, but also to elevate your level of professionalism when you're giving people like a mobile friendly real time way to collaborate on the timelines. And it's really awesome. So please do yourself a favor, go to timelinegenius.com, start a free trial, watch a video on the homepage. And before I come back with my last questions on the business front for you, Kristin, I kind of said this at the top of the interview, and I have a question about Timeline Genius for you. You've seen Timeline Genius from doggone near its inception. I mean, you were really, I don't remember exactly when we first connected, but it's really been years, and you saw it, and something about the project resonated with you enough so that despite the status that you had in our industry and how busy you were, you actually were kind enough to give me guidance and direction on the project. What was it about the project? And you may not even recall at this point because it's been a long time, but what was it about the project that kind of drew you in and led you to be as helpful to me as you were?
Well, it's I haven't forgotten because I certainly don't lend name and support to just anything. It's important that I believe in something before aligning with another company. You have truly developed a tremendous tool. What makes this such a useful resource is truly, it goes back to what you mentioned, is how much you've listened to those in the industry. This is not something that has arbitrarily been developed and stamped and thrown out there. This is something that's been crafted over years, with you listening, adjusting, listening, reconfiguring. And what you've come up with is something that is so multifaceted in terms of how much it saves time. Absolutely. Without solid timelines, all of this stuff that we're talking about, the design side and guest experience, it cannot ever come to fruition if there isn't a flow to an event that is functional, that makes sense, where there's an appropriate time to actually make these things happen. uh, it doesn't the it cannot succeed. And taking timelines seriously is more important than anything else that can be done. It's truly, it can't just happen. It has to be something that's organized and that is, from start to finish, thought of from every moment. Then we can have success, and then the design can matter. But without that, it just doesn't make any sense. So, I commend you because you really have developed something that is super user friendly, that anyone can dive into, and have a template there that can create a successful event. It's pretty
Well,
amazing.
I really appreciate that, Kristen, and even more than those kind words, really just the support, because I certainly couldn't have done it. I mean, I was completely relying on listening because I'm not a planner, but just listening to people like you and other, people that were kind enough to give me their input along the way. It's been just a really wonderful journey. What I want to do here, again, just kind of watching the time race, there are a couple of other questions that I wanted to. We talked about the design, and like I said, I just feel like that's your bail. You're so good at that. It would be remiss in my duties to not talk about that with you. But also, you and I, I've had the benefit of watching you over the years and vice versa. Just like you've seen Timeline Genius grow, we were talking about the pandemic and just the inevitable ups and downs that happen in business. And don't get me wrong, we're not going to go all the way down the rabbit hole here because we don't have the time. But I want to just ask you, you've been in business now for decades. Like, how have you managed to, so many businesses like come and go before 5 years, right? They're done. Like, how have you managed to keep doing what you're doing at the level that you're doing, from a business standpoint? Like, what has guided you and gotten you through all these years to where you are today?
You know, I have been very fortunate to surround myself with tremendous talent. My team are they are truly a gift to me. I can't possibly emphasize that enough. It is so much about who we align ourselves with. I have a tremendous pool of talent that I get to work with on the vendor and supplier side that is just a game changer. That's been a huge part of the success that we've seen, is just who I've been fortunate to align myself with. Um, you know, it's also, I think, on the business side, been very important to be thoughtful of remaining fluid and being very thoughtful about the fact that there are constant swings within our industry. We are really beholden to a lot of different components, many of which are the flow of sort of the economic stability that is in the current climate. Remaining fluid in the face of that is really important. Watching the business of how we run our businesses will ultimately allow us to stay in this game for the long haul. But that's something that can't be overlooked. And you and I have kind of talked about this. We've seen a number of years where there have been crashes within the industry, downturns. How to navigate through those is really about kind of watching the bottom line and being really thoughtful about running a tight business. Um,
Yeah.
so that is something that also has taken me through the pandemic and gotten me to the other side, in addition to it, really trying to determine where are all the areas where our skill sets can apply. As I did a deep dive into virtual design during the pandemic. I had to develop that side of my creativity, and by the way, I am not a tech person. Like, if I look at a computer wrong, you know something invariably will break, and I have to call people with just panic on my face. I am the worst. I seriously, I don't know how I function on a daily basis. I'm truly not sure. But I had to develop skills along the way and stretch my get out of my comfort zone in order to stay in this game. That's something that I will always encourage those to think about, is what else could we be doing? What have we not tapped into? And that, I think, will allow longevity at all times.
I love that, Kristen. We're going to have to get you back on for a third interview sometime soon, because there's definitely more that I could ask you kind of in that direction. But I will, in the interest of time here, there's one question that I always ask, to kind of put a cherry on top of the sundae here. And this has just been a fantastic interview. I knew it would be. Um, if you could give one piece of advice to everybody listening right now, that would be your number one piece of advice to help them succeed, what would that piece of advice be?
Honestly, it would be to have a point of view. I'm going to wrap it with where we started,
Yeah.
and to not be afraid to take risks. They should
Yeah.
be calculated, but that will always allow any of us to have a place within the industry that is ours. And there will always be a home for those of us that stand out because we have figured out what it is that we are contributing. Otherwise, we're just one in the masses, and cutting through the amount of talent in our industry is very challenging. That, I think, will always, if one can always come back to that place of what is it that makes me unique? What is my unique contribution to this industry? What is my point of view? Um, there will always be a home for those talents.
It's funny, Kristen. You were, it's been years, so I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure when we talked back in 2016, and obviously you've evolved, I've evolved as a person, but then in our core, there's a through line and a consistency. But I feel like you were saying something very similar, pointing to this notion that, like, we're all unique individuals. There's never has been, nor will there ever be another Kristin Banta or Eddie Babbage, and just kind of leaning into embracing that uniqueness and having the courage to let it shine out into the world. I just feel like that's a beautiful, not just to bring it full circle for this interview, but even to kind of give that narrative symmetry with the first interview we did, which everybody, you should definitely go check that out, because what we talked about is just as relevant today as it was then. But Kristen, if people on hearing this interview want to follow you online or want to connect with you, what are the best ways for people to do that?
We're on Instagram at Kristin Banta, and anyone can always email me at Kristin@KristinBanta.com. I am happy to engage in conversations and to be of service where I can.
Love it. Kristin, thank you on behalf of our Timeline Genius community and all of our Wedding Industry Insider podcast listeners. You are a rock star. Keep doing your thing, working your magic, and inspiring the way you do. We're lucky to have you in this industry, and I was very lucky to have you on the show. Thank you.
Oh, Eddie, thank you so much. I love chatting with you. Thanks for having me.